I never thought a weekend trip could stir up the kind of restlessness I'd been trying to ignore for years. Maybe it was the way the autumn air carried a bite of cold, sharp enough to wake something in me, or maybe it was just him, always him. Eli had been part of my life since high school, though we'd drifted in and out of each other's orbit with college, jobs, and the general mess of growing up. But somehow he'd always been the constant I didn't want to admit I relied on. When he texted me a few weeks ago, "You coming on the ranch trip or you gonna keep making excuses?" I said yes before I could stop myself. Now here I was, riding shotgun in his old pickup, the leather seats worn and cracked, smelling faintly of dust and cedar. He drove with one arm draped over the steering wheel, his hat tipped back, humming along to a country station. It was so achingly familiar it almost hurt. I fiddled with the cuff of my jacket, watching the mountains rise in the distance. "Hard to believe you still have this truck," I said, mostly just to hear the sound of my own voice. Eli smirked without glancing at me. "Runs better than you'd think. Besides, she's got character. Not everything's meant to be replaced." He always said things like that, offhand easy, but they hit harder than he knew. I bit back the reply sitting on my tongue, the one that would have sounded too much like "I wish you thought that way about people too." Instead, I just nodded, tucking the thought away like I'd done 100 times before. The trip was supposed to be a casual reunion, 2 days at his family's ranch, campfires, beers, maybe some horseback riding if he could talk me into it. But even before we pulled onto the long dirt road leading to the house, I felt the shift. Something unspoken hummed between us, and I knew this wouldn't be just another weekend. When we arrived, Eli hopped out first, stretching his arms, the late afternoon sun catching on the curve of his jaw. He turned back, grinning at me, that same boyish grin I'd known since I was 15 but which did entirely different things to me now. "Come on," he called. "Let's make a fire before the sun's gone." I followed him, pretending not to notice how my chest tightened at the sound of his laugh or the way his shoulder brushed mine when he handed me kindling. But the truth was there, sparking just beneath the surface, like the firewood waiting to catch flame. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to keep it buried. Eli and I had a rhythm that never really faded, even during the years we barely spoke. Some friendships are like that, pick up where you left off kinds of things. But with him, it always felt like more than habit. It was like gravity. We met when we were 15, both awkward in different ways. He was the kid who wore boots to school before it was cool, the one who could talk to anyone without breaking a sweat. I was quieter, more book-smart than street-smart, the one who carried around a sketchbook instead of a football. We couldn't have been more different, but somehow that made us inseparable. He once told me I was the only person who didn't make him feel like he had to perform, like he could just breathe. I never told him that was exactly how I felt about him, too. That night by the fire, the memories of all those years sat with us like old friends. He poked at the flames with a stick, his profile lit gold by the dancing light. "Remember that time you tried to camp out in your backyard and the sprinklers went off at 2 in the morning?" he asked, grinning at me. I groaned. "You could have stopped me from setting up the tent directly over the sprinkler head." "I could have," he said, chuckling. "But then I wouldn't have the image burned into my brain of you sprinting across the yard in your SpongeBob pajamas." "Those were limited edition," I muttered, trying to hide my smile behind my beer bottle. He nudged my boot with his. "Still my favorite memory." It was always like that with us. Jokes layered over something unspoken, laughter covering a deeper pull. The silence after our banter never felt awkward, though. It was comfortable, like the quiet you only share with someone who knows you too well. As the night deepened, the temperature dropped faster than I expected. My jacket wasn't nearly enough, and despite sitting close to the fire, the chill crept into my bones. Eli noticed, of course he always did. "You're shivering," he said. Without waiting for me to answer, he stood, ducked into the small shed near the porch, and came back with 2 sleeping bags slung over his shoulder. He tossed one at me. "Here. Extra insulation." I caught it, laughing. "You're ridiculous." "Smart," he corrected. Then, with that same mischievous grin, "Besides, I'm not about to let you freeze to death on my watch. What kind of host would that make me?" I unrolled the sleeping bag and slipped inside, still sitting by the fire. It smelled faintly of cedar and smoke, familiar in a way that made my stomach twist. Eli sat back down, wrapping himself in the other, his knee brushing mine. Neither of us moved away. The moment stretched, his eyes catching mine in the flickering firelight, the kind of look that lingers just a beat too long. I broke it first, clearing my throat. "Bet you planned this," I teased, forcing lightness into my voice. "Get me wrapped in one of your sleeping bags so I owe you." He laughed, low and easy, but there was something else in his smile, something softer. "You think too much, you know that? Not everything's a scheme." "Maybe," I said, though my heart didn't believe it. A gust of wind rustled the trees around us, sending sparks spiraling upward. Eli leaned back, tilting his head toward the stars. Damn, I've missed this, he said quietly. Just sitting out here with you. Feels like old times. His words settled over me heavier than the sleeping bag. I wanted to tell him I'd missed it too, missed him more than I could ever say, but the truth stuck in my throat. Instead, I let the silence answer for me, my gaze fixed on the fire while my pulse raced from the warmth of his knee still pressed against mine. And I knew then, as clearly as I knew the night sky was endless, that this trip wasn't just a trip. Something was shifting between us, and for the first time I wasn't sure if I could, or even wanted to, stop it. The first sign of trouble came with the wind. By the time we'd finished our second round of beers, the night had shifted, no longer crisp and calm but sharp with a sudden edge. The trees moaned as gusts barreled down the ridge, carrying with them the smell of rain. Eli glanced up at the sky, his easy grin fading. Storms rolling in faster than I thought. I followed his gaze. Dark clouds churned above, swallowing stars we'd been staring at minutes before. A fat drop of water hit my hand, then another. Perfect, I muttered, scrambling up as the fire hissed under the first wave of rain. Eli was already moving, tossing dirt on the flames before grabbing the gear. Come on, help me drag this stuff inside before it all soaks. By the time we hauled everything onto the porch, the storm had broken in full force. Rain came down in sheets, drumming against the roof, soaking my hair, my clothes, everything. My teeth chattered as I dropped the last bundle of wood by the wall. Damn, Eli said, shaking water from his hat before setting it on the table. His flannel clung to him, outlining broad shoulders, the curve of muscle in his arms. I tried not to notice, failed miserably. He kicked off his boots and gestured toward the door. Let's get inside before you catch hypothermia. You look like a drowned cat. The ranch house wasn't exactly small, but it wasn't prepared for overnight guests either. His parents had sold off most of the livestock years ago, keeping only the land and the cabin for weekends. There were 2 bedrooms, his old one and the master, and neither had been made up. Sheets were musty, furniture covered with cloths. Eli pulled one of the cloths away from the couch and frowned. Damn. Springs are shot. You'll never sleep here. I rubbed my arms, still shivering. I'll survive. No way, he said firmly. You'll wake up bent like a pretzel. We'll share my bed. It's big enough. I froze. My brain scrambled for a protest, something casual, something that didn't sound like my heart is currently attempting to climb out of my throat. But Eli was already walking toward his old room, tossing his wet shirt onto a chair, completely unfazed. I followed, feeling like every step was dragging me closer to a cliff I'd been skirting for years. His room was almost exactly as I remembered it, posters of rodeos on the walls, a guitar propped in the corner, shelves still holding books and trophies. Nostalgia hit me in waves, but the bed was what held my attention. A queen, sure, but suddenly it looked impossibly small. Eli dug through a dresser and tossed me a t-shirt and sweatpants. Here. Dry off before you catch something. I hesitated, staring at the clothes in my hands. They smelled like him, cedar, soap, and something warmer, something I couldn't name but had always associated with comfort. When I came back from changing in the bathroom, Eli was already stretched out on one side of the bed, hair damp, chest bare above the blanket. He looked at me, eyebrows raised. What? Don't tell me you're shy now. We've had worse sleepovers. I climbed in slowly, careful to stay on my side, careful not to touch. The mattress dipped under his weight, pulling me closer anyway. For a while, the storm filled the silence, rain hammering against the roof, wind howling through the cracks. I thought maybe Eli had fallen asleep until his voice cut through the dark. You ever think about how weird it is? He asked softly. How we always end up back here. Like no matter what, it circles us around. I swallowed. Yeah. Weird. His hand shifted on the blanket, brushing against mine. Accidental, I told myself. He didn't move it away. Neither did I. My pulse pounded in my ears. I missed this, he said, almost too quiet to hear. Missed you. The words sank into me like stones dropped into a lake, ripples spreading outward. My chest ached with the weight of everything I wanted to say back but couldn't. I missed you every day. I think about you more than I should. I don't know what I'd do if you didn't look at me the way you just did. Instead, I laughed weakly. You're just saying that because I'm stuck here keeping you company during a storm. Eli turned his head, eyes catching mine even in the dim light. There was no teasing in his expression, no smirk. Just something raw, unguarded. You really think I'd say it if I didn't mean it? I opened my mouth, then closed it, heat flooding my face. I couldn't look away though. His gaze held me there, pinned between fear and longing, the storm outside nothing compared to the one inside me. And then, God help me, he shifted closer. His arm brushed against mine fully this time, warm and solid under the blanket. My breath caught. I should have pulled back. I should have said something to lighten the mood, to keep us safe in the space we'd built for years. But I didn't. I let the silence stretch, let the closeness tighten like a rope around my chest, until all I could think was how badly I wanted to close the last inches between us. And yet, I lay there, heart pounding, afraid of what it might mean if I did. The storm didn't let up. It raged against the ranch house like it was trying to tear the walls down, but all I could feel was the heat of Eli's arm against mine. Every nerve in my body was tuned to that single point of contact, my thoughts looping like a broken record. Don't move. Don't ruin it. Don't want more than he's offering. But wanting was a dangerous thing and I was drowning in it. I must have been too quiet because Eli shifted, propping himself on one elbow to look down at me. His hair was messy, still damp, falling into his eyes. In the dim light, his expression was unreadable, but the closeness made my pulse stutter. "You okay?" he asked softly. "Yeah," I lied, forcing a laugh that didn't sound like me. "Just listening to the storm." "He didn't buy it." "He never did." "You always get this look," he said, studying me like I was a puzzle he could solve. "Like you're thinking 1,000 things and won't say one of them." I turned onto my back, staring at the ceiling. "Maybe I am." "Then say one," he pressed. The weight of his words pressed harder than the storm, harder than his arm brushing mine. I opened my mouth, closed it again. My chest ached with the truth clawing to get out, the fear of it changing everything we were. Eli's hand shifted, his fingers brushing mine under the blanket. "Come on," he coaxed. "You can tell me anything. You always have." That was the problem. He didn't know this truth, the one I'd buried for years under jokes and casual touches, under silence. But here, in the dark, with rain drowning out the world, I couldn't hold it in anymore. My throat tightened. I forced the words past it. "I've missed you. More than I should have." Eli went still. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the storm. Then quietly, "What do you mean?" I swallowed, my mouth dry. "I mean, it's not just the friendship I missed. It's the way you laugh, the way you make everything feel lighter. The way you've always made me feel like I belong even when I didn't believe it myself." And I faltered, shaking my head. "I don't know how to stop wanting that. Wanting you." The silence that followed was brutal. I stared at the ceiling, my chest heaving, bracing for him to laugh, to pull away, to say I'd ruined everything. Instead, Eli let out a shaky breath. "Jesus." I risked a glance at him. His hand was still against mine, not retreating. His expression was wide open, vulnerable in a way I'd never seen. "You think you've been the only one?" he said finally. My heart slammed against my ribs. "What?" He huffed out a laugh, but it wasn't mocking. It was nervous, almost disbelieving. "You don't get it, do you? I've been trying to tell myself for years that what I feel is just friendship, that I'm imagining it. But then you look at me the way you do and it screws with my head." His voice cracked. "Hell, it screws with my heart." The room tilted. "You feel it too?" "Of course I do," he said fiercely, and for the first time, there was no teasing in his tone. "Why do you think I kept asking you to come out here? Why do you think it never felt the same without you around?" His hand finally closed around mine, fingers warm and certain. "I thought if I said it out loud I'd lose you." My laugh broke, half sob, half relief. "That's exactly why I kept my mouth shut." We stared at each other, years of silence and longing and missed chances hanging heavy between us. The storm outside roared, but in here, it felt like everything had gone still, waiting. "I don't want to lose you," I whispered. "You won't," he said, and the conviction in his voice almost undid me. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then Eli shifted closer, his forehead brushing mine, the heat of him overwhelming in the cool, damp air. My breath caught. "You sure about this?" he murmured, his lips inches from mine. "Because once I start, I don't think I can stop pretending." I swallowed hard, every nerve screaming yes. "I don't want you to stop." The kiss wasn't explosive, not at first. It was tentative, almost cautious, like we were testing the water after years of standing on the edge. His lips were soft, warm, lingering against mine like a question. I answered with everything I had, leaning in, my hand fisting in the fabric of his shirt as if anchoring myself to him. When he deepened the kiss, the hesitation melted away. All the longing I'd buried, all the fear, all the nights I'd wanted this, it spilled out in that moment, raw and desperate. His hand cupped the back of my neck, steadying me, while mine slid along his jaw, feeling the scratch of stubble against my fingertips. When we finally broke apart, breathless, his forehead still rested against mine. He laughed softly, the sound shaky but real. "About damn time," he whispered. I smiled, my chest aching in the best way. "Yeah. About time." We lay there in the storm's embrace, the weight of what we'd just admitted sinking in. But instead of fear, all I felt was a strange, powerful calm. Like something that had been wrong for years had finally clicked into place. Eli's thumb brushed over my knuckles, grounding me. "We'll figure it out," he said quietly. "Whatever comes next. I don't care how messy it is. I want this. I want you." Tears stung my eyes, but I didn't look away. "Me too." And for the first time, the words didn't feel like a risk. They felt like home. The storm softened overnight, though I hardly noticed. My whole world had shrunk down to Eli, the warmth of him pressed against me, the taste of his lips lingering, the weight of everything we'd finally said. For years I'd dreamed about this moment, and now that it was real, I felt dizzy, almost afraid to blink in case it vanished. Eli lay on his side, head propped on one hand, watching me with a grin that made my chest ache. "You look like you're trying to figure out if you hallucinated that." I snorted. "Pretty sure I did. No way the Eli Harper I know would just kiss me out of nowhere." He raised an eyebrow, playful. "Out of nowhere? You practically begged for it." "Begged?" I shoved at his shoulder, laughing, though the heat in my face betrayed me. "I don't remember that part." "Selective memory," he teased, leaning in just close enough that I could feel his breath. "Good thing I do." I kissed him again before he could gloat further, quick but firm, cutting off his chuckle. When I pulled back, his eyes softened, and the grin faded into something quieter, heavier. "This feels unreal," he admitted. "I've wanted it so long, I don't know what to do now that it's actually happening." "Same," I said. My hand found his under the blanket, lacing our fingers together. "I keep thinking we're gonna wake up tomorrow and laugh about it. Pretend it never happened." His grip tightened. "I'm not pretending anymore. I'm done with that." The conviction in his voice sent a shiver through me, this one not from the cold. For years, we'd lived in the space between friendship and something more, afraid to name it. Now it felt like we'd stepped into the light, and though it was blinding, it was also beautiful. We lay there for a while, trading kisses and small touches, each one feeling like a revelation. His thumb brushed along my jaw. My hand rested on his chest, feeling the steady thrum of his heartbeat. Every little detail, every gesture felt loaded with meaning now. Eventually, though, reality crept back in. "What happens when the weekend's over?" I asked quietly, not wanting to but needing to. Eli sighed, staring up at the ceiling. "I don't know. Guess we figure it out. It's not like I've got some grand plan written down." He looked back at me, a smile tugging at his lips. "But I know I don't want this to end when you drive away." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Me neither." "Then we'll make it work," he said simply, like it wasn't complicated, like distance and fear and the rest of the world didn't matter. And maybe, with him, it didn't. I laughed softly. "You make it sound easy." He shrugged. "Being with you always was." I rolled my eyes, but the words burrowed deep. "Cheesy cowboy. City boy likes it," he shot back. I grinned, shaking my head as I leaned in to kiss him again. This time it was slower, deeper, less about the rush of finally and more about the promise of what now. When we broke apart, our foreheads rested together. My chest felt light, freer than it had in years. "We're really doing this," I whispered. "Yeah," he said, brushing his lips over mine again, tender. "We are." And for the first time, the future didn't feel like a question mark. It felt like something worth running toward, as long as he was there beside me. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed clean. The air outside smelled of wet earth and pine, sharp and new, as though everything had been reset overnight. Eli was already up, pulling on his boots by the door. His hair stuck up in every direction, his t-shirt wrinkled, and yet I'd never seen anything more perfect. He caught me staring and smirked. "What? You look like you've never seen a man put on boots before." "Not one who kissed me last night," I shot back, my voice still scratchy from sleep. His smirk softened into a grin, one that lit something in my chest. "Get used to it." We stepped outside together, the yard glistening with puddles, the mountains stretching out under a pale morning sky. Everything felt brighter, sharper, as though the world was conspiring to make sure I remembered this moment. Eli handed me a mug of coffee, still steaming. His fingers lingered when they brushed mine, small and deliberate. "So," he said almost casually, "we really doing this?" I sipped the coffee to stall, though my heart was already racing. "You mean, us?" "Yeah." He leaned against the porch rail watching me. I don't want last night to just be some fluke, some storm thing. I want it to be the start. The words sank into me with a weight that felt steady, grounding. I nodded, unable to keep the smile from breaking across my face. Then it's the start. He let out a breath like he'd been holding it for years. Then, without ceremony, he reached for my hand. His grip was warm, certain, his thumb brushing across my knuckles as if to seal the promise. It was such a simple gesture, but it felt monumental. We stood like that for a while, watching the sunlight break through the clouds, our hands twined together. The silence was easy, full of something new but familiar all the same. You know, Eli said after a long moment, you still owe me for that SpongeBob pajama story. If word gets out, you're doomed. I groaned, rolling my eyes. I knew you'd bring that up again. Of course, he said with mock solemnity. It's basically a cornerstone of our history. I bumped my shoulder into his. Guess you're stuck with me then. Pajamas and all. Good, he said quietly, his voice losing its playfulness. That's exactly how I want it. Something in his tone, steady and unshakable, left me breathless. For years I'd been terrified of what might happen if I admitted how I felt. But now, standing there with his hand in mine and the mountains stretching endlessly ahead, the fear was gone. All that remained was the certainty that this was where I belonged. I squeezed his hand, anchoring myself to the moment. So what now? Eli's grin returned, lopsided and warm. Now, we finish our coffee, clean up the mess, and maybe go riding if the ground's not too slick. And after that, we keep figuring it out. Together. It wasn't a grand plan. It wasn't dramatic. But it was us, simple, honest, steady. And for the first time that was more than enough. As we stepped off the porch, boots squelching in the wet grass, Eli tugged me a little closer, his arm brushing mine. The gesture was small, almost casual, but I knew what it meant. It meant that last night wasn't a mistake. It meant we were starting something new, something worth holding on to. And as the sun rose higher, chasing away the last of the storm, I realized I wasn't sitting by the fire anymore. The cowboy had pulled me closer, and this time I wasn't letting go.